elevation, mass balance, momentum balance. But you can do a simple order of magnitude analysis in order to really get the thickness of boundary layer in terms of Reynolds number. So how is that? Let us see. Like say, suppose you take the continuity equation, say del u by del x plus del v by del y equal to 0. So I first take the continuity equation. And I know that, say, suppose if there is a flat plate, right? And then there is a boundary layer that is developing from the leading edge. So I know that this free stream velocity is u infinity. And this thickness of the boundary layer is defined as delta. Now, in that sort of situation, I can assume that this u to be u infinity, sorry, this y to be delta, right? This x is the leading edge, this particular distance, this is the x, after which it is becoming fully developed. And then what I do not know about the velocity v, which is my y directional velocity. So if I just replace this order of magnitudes in this equation, say u infinity by x, and this is v by delta. So you may see that the velocity becomes u infinity delta by x. So I get an order of magnitude of v, which is the y directional velocity. Now what I do, I go to the momentum equation. So what is my momentum equation in steady state? U del u del x. This is the convective acceleration term. V del u del y. This is the x momentum equation I have taken. And then that is equal to nu, which is the kinematic viscosity, mu by rho. The rho was here. I took it down here to make it mu by rho, del square u by del y square. So here again, I plug in these values, what I got from u, y, v, and x. So this will be what? U infinity into u infinity by x. This will be what? V is I am replacing from here, u infinity delta by x to u by delta. And then right side nu into u infinity. This is u infinity divided by delta square. Now, if I put it this way, and then if I look for what is delta, delta comes out to be root over of nu x by u infinity. It's just simple calculation. And then if I write delta by x, then what I get, that is equal to 1 by root over of Rex. So just by doing a very simple order of magnitude analysis, I can really tell that, okay, delta will be a function of what? Is a function of what? Say 1 by Reynolds number, right? 1 by Reynolds number to the power half in case of this is a laminar flow. So you can see a very cute and simple derivation can lead to what? Can give me the same conclusion that we did with the boundary layer theory. Great. Now, I said that, we derived a particular form of this equation, which is the Dietz-Boelter equation. So there, the exponents were a bit different. So what I understand that, for any type of flow situation, any type of heat transfer related to flow, right, where convection and conduction is incorporated, I can make use of a very generic framework where Nusselt number is equal to Reynolds number to the power 1 exponent and Prandtl number to the power another exponent. Right. So I can really write that Nusselt number is equal to what? Is a function of, say, Reynolds number to the power m and the Prandtl number to the power n. Now, this sort of framework has been first proposed by Dietz-Boelter because, geometry can be very, very diversified. But overall, if you look at the heat transfer coefficient, that heat transfer coefficient is dependent largely on these parameters. And if I keep changing the exponents and the coefficients, I'll be able to really map most of the things. For example, say, suppose you normal isothermal pipe flow, you encounter a parabolic profile. But if you have a gas heating, you may see the parabolic profile changes like this, whereas a liquid heating and gas cooling, the profile changes like this. This happens, dynamically because of, say, suppose natural convection, because of turbulence, different types of things, the flow profile changes. So inside a pipe flow, what I can do, I can still manage, different types of situations just by having a very common, equation which is called the Dietz-Boelter equation. And then for a given flow, given condition, what I do, I find these exponents. For example, n equal to 0.4 or n equal to this Prandtl number to the power n is equal to 0.4 for heating of fluid. Okay, n equal to 0.3 for cooling of a fluid. So in that manner, people have developed, I mean, n number of equations. If you open Hallman, you will see that, this type of equations, are developed for different types of flow situations, which are having different types of exponents for fluid, gas, multi-phase, pipe, different types of flow notches, different types of non-circular geometries. Okay. So the idea is that you perform a number of experiments and you plot with respect to Nusselt number by Prandtl number to the power some exponent divided by Reynolds number, right? And then from there you try and find out that how exactly they fit it to develop the exponents. So this particular relationship is called the Dietz-Boelter correlation, which is very, very important to obtain what? Essentially you are looking for a heat transfer coefficient, which is a very, very important parameter in order to determine the total convective heat transfer that is happening, for the given phenomenon. Okay, so to cut the long story short, that we were discussing for last 4 or 5 lectures, that okay, this is a transfer coefficient, okay, this is thermal boundary layer, okay, this is hydrodynamic boundary layer, okay, this is the way you define heat transfer coefficient as the thermal conductivity divided by the thermal boundary layer. Okay, you determine the thermal boundary layer thickness like first you determine the hydrodynamic boundary layer, then you determine the thermal boundary layer, and then from there you determine the heat transfer coefficient. Now, once you are done with all the fundamental aspects of this heat transfer coefficient calculations, the final thing that need to be remembered for engineering operations, engineering calculations, or like any problems that you are doing here, or any question that you are appearing in the interview during your during your job interviews, right? So if you are really looking for heat transfer coefficient for a system, you should always look forward for a Dietz-Boelter type correlation, where given the flow rate, given all the physical properties, you will be able to really get the heat transfer coefficient. Now, once you have the heat transfer coefficient, you can really calculate the convective heat transfer. And given the other properties, you can also calculate the thermal conductivity and all. You can also calculate the conductive heat transfer. Now, if you combine, you are able to really model for a given geometry how to really model the convective and conductive heat transfer, right? So this is one parameter. So if you really summarize the heat transfer very well, like one of the parameters which is very complicated to calculate is H, which is the heat transfer coefficient, and the other parameter which is very difficult to calculate is the friction factor, which you are already studying in fluid mechanics. So these are the two engineering parameters which are associated with the flow. So friction tells you, in case of a fluid mechanics, in case of a fluid mechanical situation, friction tells you the loss associated with the energy that you have invested. Correct? Now that loss also has a correlation with the heat transfer, because friction also leads to the thermal energy generation. If you say, suppose, rub your hands, you will find that there is a heat that is generated. Now this type of heat is, basically you are doing work and you are generating heat. Now that also has a consequence towards your heat transfer. So how do you do that? Can anybody tell me what is this particular plot is called? Anybody has any idea? You are doing this in fluid mechanics, right? Have you arrived up to that point? Sorry. Anybody? Have you arrived up to this point in fluid mechanics? Are you taught this about this? Yes, no. Kuch to bolo.
No, sir.
You are not taught, right? Okay, so let me just teach you. So this is, acha, can anybody tell me what type of, don't worry about what is there inside the plot. There is I have a y-axis, I have an x-axis, right? I have a y-axis and I have an x-axis, right? Now you see this y-axis and x-axis are not typically uniform like the graph plots that we have plotted up to this point, but they are non-uniform in nature. If you closely look at the x and y-axis, Now, if I ask you that this type of graphs, what is the name of this type of graph? Anybody has any idea? Where you have a non-uniform y and non-uniform x-axis, and how exactly you achieve this non-uniformity? You have any idea? What type of plot is this? I mean, get away from fluid mechanics and all everything. So typically in your graph plot, what you have plotted up to this point, what is the minimum unit that you had? So the plot looked like this, right? You had rectangular grids like this, right? What was the minimum unit there? What was the minimum unit there? The width of this and that.
1 centimeter, like 1 by 1.
Centimeter or millimeter?
The smallest was 1 millimeter. The smallest
1 millimeter by 1 millimeter. That they were uniform, right? Now in this situation, they are non-uniform, right?
Yes, sir.
So what type of plot is this?
Non-uniform plot.
So these are called log plots. Okay.
Okay.
So you can see that here 10 to the power 3, here 10 to the power 4, here 10 to the power 5, 10 to the power 6, 10 to the power 7, 10 to the power 8, right? That means, say suppose, here generally you put what? 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So you are changing the order of magnitude here. So this point is 10 to the power 3. Now this particular point is what? Say 2 into 10 to the power 3, right? This particular point is what? 3 into 10 to the power 3, right? So similarly, you are going up to say suppose 10 to the power 3 to say 10 to the power 4, and you will find that they are divided into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So there will be 10 divisions between two. Let us start from here. Now there is a problem here. They might have mixed this up. So let us start from here. So this is 10 to the power 4, right? So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. What is happening here? So there will be 10 divisions now. So it is written here that this one is 2 into 10 to the power. This one is 2 into 10 to the power 4. This one is 3 into 10 to the power 4. This one is 4 into 10 to the power 4. So essentially, if you look at a log plot, it will happen like, say this. If this is the gap. So what will happen? The one will be a little larger. Then you will find there will be 2. Then you will find there will be 3, right? Then you will find there will be 4. Then you will find there will be 5. Okay, slowly the distance will keep reducing. Then you will be 6. Then you will find 7. Okay, then you will find 8. Then you will find 9. And then the next will come, which is your, say suppose this is 10 to the power 3. This will become 10 to the power 4. Now, why am I plotting like this? So if you really try to calculate, this you will derive in case of, fluid mechanics, that if I have a laminar flow, okay, and then, I want to know what is the friction coefficient, right? That comes out to be 64 by Reynolds number. Okay, and this is called the fanning friction factor. Right? Now, say suppose I want to plot my y-axis is my friction factor, which is F. Okay, this is my F, right? This is my friction factor F, and this is my Reynolds number Re, correct? So if the equation looks like this, if the equation is F equal to 64 by Re, what do I expect? What type of plot I will have if I plot F versus Re?
Sir, on a regular graph, it will be a like hyperbola, but in this case, it would be somewhat a straight line.
Is it a hyperbola? Is it a hyperbola only?
Rectangular. In this case, it won't be, because like the scale is only different.
Yes.
Like, what regular one?
What type of parabola hyperbola I expect? So for a F versus Re plot, I will be expecting what? If I normally plot in a millimeter scale, so F versus Re will look like a rectangular hyperbola, right?
Yes, sir.
Whereas, say if F is equal to 64 by RE, okay, then if I take right hand side log of F will be equal to what? My log of 64, right? Minus log of RE. If I take log here, right? So now if I plot log of F versus log of RE, what do I expect to happen?
Straight line.
It will be a straight line. So you can see this is a straight line. This is point number 1. So this axis, although it is written friction factor, but essentially you are plotting log of F, and this axis, which is Reynolds number, although this is written as Reynolds number, but this is you are plotting log of Reynolds number. Okay. Now, so if it is a straight line, what should be the slope of the straight line? According to this equation, what will be the slope of the equation? -1.
Yes,
so it will be negative slope, right? So you can see there is negative slope, and there will be an intercept which is, say, suppose log 64, correct? The intercept will be there. I mean, there will be an intercept. When you go asymptotically move towards 0, there cannot be a 0 here, right? Because log 0 is non-existent, right? Now, in that process, you may see that what you can do, you can really plot a large number of Reynolds number in the x-axis and a large number of friction factor in the y-axis. Essentially, here you are now looking at the order of magnitudes, right? Say, suppose if you have a Reynolds number to be, say, suppose you have a Reynolds number to be 10 to the power 3. Reynolds number to be, normal Reynolds number to be 10 to the power 3, right? So then what happens? Then how much it becomes in case of a log scale? You know, if I put log, what will happen? What should I look at here? What should be the number I should be looking at here? It's log RE, right? So what should be the number? Means log RE to the power 3, right? So you can see that, you know, now this particular order of magnitude, it carries how much? Say suppose 10 to the power 3 to 10 to the power 8. So you are basically squeezing the data in a particular place. This is point number 2. Point number 3 is that there was a scientist, German scientist, his name was Nikuratse. So what he did, he took a pipe, okay, and he set up a flow rate. Say suppose he has set up a flow rate Q, which led to an average velocity of V bar, and he kept changing that velocity across a flow profile that is happening through a pipe. And what he did, he defined the friction factor, this pressure drop. What you are doing, you are applying through the pump. Then you know the density of water, L by D, length by diameter, and V square. This is what you are changing with the flow rate. So this is the way he has defined the friction factor. Essentially, it will come out to be F, you know, if you replace it all the Hagen-Poiseuille parameters here. So what he did, he first did an experiment by changing this, you know, flow rate. And he saw that this particular graph, this Moody's chart, was first assembled by him. No, he performed a number of experiments to see that in laminar regime, you know, if you do a log-log plot, then what happens? Then it becomes a linear profile with a negative slope. Now, this is the critical point. This is essentially, you can see that 2 into 10 to the power 3 coming. That means 2100. You know, is the critical point here, beyond which what happens, you know, there is a discontinuity, and this is the domain. So this is the laminar flow, this is the critical zone, and this is the critical zone, this is the transition zone, and this is the turbulent zone. So essentially, for a given Reynolds number, you can really get the friction coefficient for all the flow rates that are possible. Not only that, you can also get the parameters in the turbulent domain for different types of relative roughness. So what did he do? He, you know, do you know how exactly a steel pipe is created, or steel? I mean, this you know, shell and tubes. The steel tubes are created. Do you have any idea? Say suppose if you have a pipe, if you have an iron pipe, which is of this shape, you know, how is it created practically? If you are told to create a pipe, you have to assemble, you have to really get a pipe. How will you make the pipe? Any idea? Anybody has any idea? How do you make an iron pipe? जल्दी से बोलो. Any idea how to make an iron pipe? What will be the raw material that you will purchase? जल्दी बताओ बाबा. कौन है? Somebody should say ना. How will you make an iron pipe? You are an engineer, right? If you are given the job assignment that okay, go to market, I give you adequate amount of money, how will you make the iron pipe? No idea?
By pouring the molten iron into some sort of mold or something.
Say no, that say suppose you have steel. So that is that the way, you know, you think that the iron pipes are created, that you make a mold and then, you know, you pour molten iron to make a pipe?
From the steel sheet.
Yes. What do you do with the sheet? Sorry.
In circular shape.
Yes, you take a sheet. Very nice. Excellent. So what you do, you take a sheet, you take a rectangular iron sheet, and then what you do, you roll it, right? You roll it and then, you know, you weld it at a particular point. That's the way you generate a pipe, right? Now you can really vary the parameter just by changing the length or width of the sheet, the way you are rolling. So what Nikuradze did, he, you know, put sand particles, he pasted sand particles of different size, okay, on the surface of these pipes. You know, he took different size sand particles. You know this sort of meshing and grating that can be done. Says, suppose you have a mesh, right? This is very small. You know, see, initially this is very large. Then you have a little smaller. Then you have another which is even little smaller, and then you have another little smaller. So, and then from there you are putting all the sands, right? So some will be retained here, some will be retained here, some will be retained here, some will be retained here. In that process, what you can do, you can really create I mean, a set of sand particles which has a size distribution from, say, suppose a lower limit to upper limit. So initially he took sand particles of different sizes and then he graded into different classes. And these classes, what he did, he grafted on the surface of the steel before rolling them to a kind of pipe where, like, you know, the surface was having different types of roughnesses. And then from there he defined, based on the diameter of this sand particle to the diameter of the tube, he defined the parameter called the relative roughness. And then what he did, he started flowing the fluid at different velocities in order to create the plot where this y-axis is friction factor, this y-axis is Reynolds number. So essentially for a smooth pipe, you will find this will happen. This will be the line for the laminar flow, and this will be the line for the turbulent flow. But if you keep increasing the roughness of the surface, you may find that, you know, these are the typical plots for the different Reynolds number for the turbulent flow where the roughness will change. Right? So if I ask you a question, that a very simple question for a smooth pipe, where exactly is the highest friction you find, whether it's a laminar flow or in a turbulent flow? Looking at this plot, what will be your conclusion? If you have a smooth, yes, for laminar low speed flow, you will always have the higher amount of frictional losses. That's the reason why you operate in the turbulent domain, right? And where exactly it will be lowest? In which situation it will be lowest?
In turbulent region.
In turbulent region, in highly turbulent region, right?
Yes, sir. At maximum, like 10 power 8 in this case.
10 to the power 8 and 9, there my friction is going down, right? Now question is that then why don't we really use turbulent flow to really minimize my friction? Question number 1, remember that. Okay, you get the point, right? You are getting the concept, right? I have an advantage from laminar to turbulent. That's the reason why you run the car at a faster speed. When you are into fifth gear and when you are into 40 to 50 kilometer per hour, you get more fuel efficiency than if you are running a car at 10 to 20 kilometer per hour. So there is an advantage in going at a higher speed. Number 1. Number 2, now that is true for a smooth surface. So if I ask you a question, that's suppose you are jogging on a field, right? If you jog at a very low velocity and if you jog at a high velocity, in which situation you are going to spend more energy?
When you jog at high velocity.
You are going to spend more energy?
Yes, sir.
Why?
Because we have to run more, so we will spend more energy.
Say you have completed 8 rounds, okay? That is fixed. 8 round you have gone at a higher speed. So you have utilized smaller amount of time. Say suppose you have done it in 15 minutes. Whereas somebody else who is running at a smaller velocity, lower velocity, that person is spending, say, suppose about 20-25 minutes in order to achieve that, right? So in which case you are spending more energy?
Maybe it's related to power. To spend more power.
I have said that time is no. Question is that where exactly you are. So when you are jogging, what is the restrictive force that you are encountering? What you are overcoming there? When you are jogging, what you are overcoming? There are two factors here.
Friction from the ground and drag from the air.
Yes. Now that is maximum in which situation? When you
Drag when velocity is high and
low, right? And when you are running at a lower velocity, drag will be higher. And when you are running at a higher velocity, drag will be lower.
Yes, sir.
Right? However, and then, in case when you are jogging, you are reaching, completing these eight rounds at a smaller, at a larger time as compared to those who are like, finishing in 10-20 minutes. I mean, say suppose 10 minutes, somebody is doing say 10 minutes, somebody is doing say 20 minutes, same 8 rounds. But if you are doing in laminar domain, you will end up spending more energy than if you are getting into the turbulent domain. And you can feel it. When you run faster, it is much easier. The only issue that you face that whether you have a stamina or not, that's a different factor altogether. That whether you are able to maintain high speed for a longer duration or not, like you are burning more energy, in order to really increase your speed. That is a different factor altogether. But if you look from the friction point of view, the drag force point of view, when you are running at a slower speed, you are actually overcoming more frictional forces with the energy that you are spending. So in one end, you are burning more when you are running faster. Say suppose when you are walking, when you are running, you are burning more when you are running. That is one factor. However, you are also overcoming the friction. So while walking, you have more friction than when you are running. That's why running is much easier. But then for that, you need to burn more energy. That is another factor. So combining these two factors, you have to hit an optimum speed where you will be working out the most. For a given time, if you just keep running hard at a very high speed, that will not be the best recipe. If you are running the car at 100 kilometers per hour, you may end up wasting more energy. Whereas if you run the car at 40 kilometers per hour, you may clock the fuel efficiency that is to be 25 kilometers per liter. And that's where the economics may come in, right? So the essence of the thing that I'm trying to say that laminar flow, low speed flow will always lead to what? Will always lead to a situation where you will end up spending more in terms of friction, right? Now I say that you have a pipe which is very rough, okay, and you are at high speed. Will that be more profitable?
No, sir, because the friction factor will not reduce much in rough pipes.
Any application you can think about that, you know, we use smooth surfaces in turbulence and not rough surfaces in order to reduce friction factor? Any application you think about? You take any automobile, aircraft, ship, car, you'll always find their surfaces are what? The surfaces are smooth. Their surfaces are not rough surfaces. You always apply very smooth paints. You know, paint essentially one of the main jobs, not only to protect from rust and all. One of the main jobs of the paints are to smoothening of the surfaces. And these are all scientific. This has happened over a period of time. Earlier, you used to see the very strange shaped car. But nowadays, you will find all cars are streamlined. All airplanes are streamlined. Right? All ships are streamlined. Why? Because not only streamlined, they are smooth. Why? Because your fuel efficiency has a big correlation with the frictional losses at high Reynolds number. Moment you have operating at high Reynolds number turbulent flow, your friction is less. That's the reason why you want to hit a high, you want to clock a high speed immediately. However, if your surface become rough, then you may not gain much from the laminar to turbulent flow. If you have a highly rough surface, then what happens? Then your losses will be very high. And then your laminar to turbulent region is not going to economize your own process, economize the process, the engineering process. And that's the reason whenever you have a flow past immersed body where, like, you know, you need to have a smooth surface. So what is the wisdom that I am getting from this particular plot? You know, first thing what I learned about a log-log plot, where I can condense more data in a single plot, correct? Now, what is the second thing I have learned? That, you know, the friction factor, the definition of the friction factor is given like this, right? And Reynolds number, if I plot them together in a log-log plot, this is the linear, although it is a rectangular hyperbola. Equation is of a rectangular hyperbola. So from this plot, I can really, if I know the Reynolds number, from there I can really obtain the friction factor, right? Now I know that it's a linear plot in log-log. This fanning friction factor, and then there is a discontinuity, and this discontinuity is the indication of the critical Reynolds number beyond which the turbulent flow sets in. So there is a laminar zone, there is a critical zone, there is a transition zone, and there is a turbulent zone. And in the turbulent flow at high speed, you know, I have the least friction. Now, at high speed, if the surface is rough, I will have more turbulence, I have more losses. Okay. Now there, you know, what will happen? There, the friction will increase. Right? If the surface is rough, then the friction will increase. Right? So these are the wisdoms that one can obtain from a Moody's chart, right? Any question you have with this? Because this will be necessary now, what I will be explaining later. This is only flow. Heat transfer is going to be added on this. Any question you have here? No questions?
Sir, one thing, sir, in the y-axis is like all the grid lines, are they uniform? Like in x-axis, they have a pattern, like they are according to how they should be. Like, but in y-axis, they are a bit random,
y-axis,
like, or do they have some pattern?
No, y-axis is also log. Okay, you in log plot, you always have to hit a particular point. You have to look at, like, you know, in log plot, no, you have to look at the maximum distance first. So this is where the transition takes place. You know, I had drawn earlier. You know, I had drawn earlier, no. So in a log plot, you know, these numbers are scattered in a very different way. Say suppose I look from say 0.01, right? So this is the point where it is 0.01. See, they might have scattered this in a very different way. Okay. Typically in a log-log plot, what you do, you plot from say suppose 0.01. This is for the explanatory purpose they have done that. In a log-log plot, what you do 0.01 and then you fix to say suppose 0.1. Sorry. Let me just discard this, I do it here. So it will become very easy. So in a log-log plot, what you do, you put this to say suppose 0.1 and then the next one is say suppose 0. Sorry, this is 0.01. This is 0.1 and then say suppose this is 1.0, right? So I am changing one order of magnitude. Now in that, say suppose 0.02 will be here. This is 0.02. Okay, then you will have a little smaller here, 0.03. Then you will have little smaller. So this distance will keep reducing. Then you will get finally after 10 divisions, you will get 0.01, 0.1. Could I explain once again?
Okay,
So,
sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So 0.01. Then this one will be the highest. This is 0.02. Then it will be a little smaller. This is 0.03. Then it will be even smaller. That is 0.04. This is the way if you are putting uniformly, it will come out to be like that. Then it will be a little small, 0.05. Then it will be even smaller, 0.06. Okay, then it will be even smaller, like here. This is 0.07. Then this will be 0.08, 9, 10. So this entire thing will be from 0.1 to 0.01 to 0.1. Then it will keep repeating. The uniformity will keep repeating one after the other. Okay. Yeah. Next question.
In rough pipes, we can achieve complete turbulence. So what is the meaning of this term complete turbulence?
So in transition also you have some sort of turbulence. When it is in the transition zone, you have mixing, coherent mixing, right? Those are called coherent turbulence. Like, there is some flow pattern that is there. The two vortices are mixing with each other, right? So they have a flow pattern which still can be predicted, but complete turbulence means it's a totally chaotic flow. You cannot predict any flow pattern there.
So can we achieve complete turbulence in smooth pipes?
You can achieve complete turbulence in smooth pipes also at very high speed.
Okay.
Okay, at very high speed, you can really achieve complete turbulence. But roughness has a, there is nothing called complete smooth pipe, right? You get my point. So turbulence has a connection with the roughness. Even at the molecular level, if you think about, there will be defects, right? And surface is always there is nothing called a perfect surface. Surface, how the surfaces are created. On the surface, you will always have unsatisfied bonds, right? So perhaps everything is originating from there. Could I answer your question? Great.
Yes, sir.
Sir, yes. Go ahead.
Sir, in molecular perspective, turbulence has different meaning in smooth pipes or rough pipes, right? Am I right?
Smoothness is an asymptotic case. What you mean by smooth is like an ideal gas, which doesn't exist. There is nothing called smooth in the world.
Yes.
There is always, whether it's a very low roughness or whether it's a very high roughness. So there is always a roughness. That's what I wanted to say. Okay. Clear?
Yes.
Great. So now let us understand. So friction factor, as we have already discussed in the last class, that it has a correlation with what? The Stanton number and the Reynolds number and the Prandtl number. So you see this, friction factor. There are different types of correlations used. Just need not worry. What you do, like you always remember that this sort of correlation that will be available to you for your problems, and just choose the right geometry, and from there come up with the number. So if you know the Reynolds number, Prandtl number, Nusselt number, then you are able to calculate friction number for what? In one asymptote it will be for the laminar flow. In one asymptote it will be for different regimes. You will find different types of correlations like this. Okay, so that's the summary of this particular. So you first you use Ditters-Boelter for heat transfer coefficient, and then you first understand what is friction factor, laminar, transition, turbulent, critical Reynolds number, log plot, and then you include. Now you are including. Earlier you were only correlating with the Reynolds number. This is only flow, but in case of a flow with heat transfer, you have to calculate using the Stanton number and the Prandtl number. And then, if you have non-circular geometries, you have a concept called the hydraulic diameter that you have used. So what is a hydraulic diameter? Hydraulic diameter is weighted area by flow area by weighted perimeter. Okay, flow area by weighted perimeter. This is what is called the hydraulic diameter. Flow area means, say suppose you have a pipe. Suppose you have a pipe like this, right? And in the pipe, you have a flow that is happening. The pipe is half width, right? So what is my flow area? It is pi r square, correct? Pi r square into L. So that is my, say, suppose length, the volume. So I just remove length. This is my flow area divided by what is my weighted perimeter. Say this is pi r, right? So then what is my hydraulic? This will become, I have written in terms of radius, so this will become my hydraulic radius. So my hydraulic radius will become r. Okay. So in that process, what you can do, the diameter, whatever diameter you are calculating of the pipe, say your circular pipe is replaced by a triangular pipe or a kind of rectangular pipe. I mean, I'm considering here cross section. So you just have to replace everything. Reynolds number you have to calculate in terms of the hydraulic diameter. So everywhere what you do, you have to replace this in terms of the hydraulic diameter, and then the calculation you can carry on with the calculation. Right? Great. And also you have two Nusselt number, NUH, which is average Nusselt number from uniform heat flux in the flow direction, whereas NUT is average Nusselt number for uniform wall temperature. So Nusselt number also you have earlier seen that there is an average Nusselt number, NU bar, based on the average heat transfer coefficient, or NUX, which is based on the local heat transfer coefficient. So NU bar H can be in terms of uniform heat flux, and NUT can be in terms of uniform wall temperature. So these are all available in the literature. You have to really look up to the book, and from there you have to dig out the number and then make use of them. Great. So one thing what we did not really focus about up to this point, let me just explain this part. See, can anybody tell me what are the dimensionless numbers that we have studied up to this point in heat transfer, one by one? जल्दी से बोलो कौन सा dimensionless हम लोगों ने study किया है? Say we started with Prandtl number, right? Then we studied Reynolds number, right? After that, what are the dimensionless numbers we have studied? So Prandtl number is K by rho Cp, right? So that is mu by rho Cp, right? So mu by rho into, mu Cp by K. Prandtl number is mu Cp by K, right? So K by rho Cp mu by. So this is momentum diffusivity to the thermal diffusivity. So Reynolds number is inertia to inertial force to the viscous force. Then we studied what? Then we studied Biot number, right? Which is the heat conduction, Hx by K, right? So there, you are looking at the lump capacity models, right? After that, what are the dimensionless numbers we studied? Say suppose Nusselt number, correct? Then what did we study? We studied the Archimedes number, right? What are the other dimensionless number that we studied? Two more we studied, right? What is that? Remember or forgot? So similarly, we have another number which is called the Gride's number, GZ. Okay, what it does, you see that Guy's number is defined as Reynolds number, Prandtl number into d by x. So suppose if you have a pipe, okay, and you this at the entrance of the pipe, the flow that is coming, this is a plug flow, it's a uniform. Now I know that this particular flow will become parabolic after certain point of time, if it is laminar flow, right? Now this particular flow is called the fully developed flow. This is called a developing flow. Okay, now you may understand that the heat transfer characteristics in the fully developed flow will be very different than the one in the developing region, because the flow profiles are different, right? So this particular effect, this particular length, that is called the x, and this particular distance, this is the diameter d, and this x by d or d by x is called the effect of the inference for any geometry. So this Reynolds number into Prandtl number can be corrected based on this entrance effect d by x, which is called the Guy's number. And when you plot Nusselt number x to Nusselt number infinity, that means what? After some length, and this is after a very big length. So x by d. So if you just plot them, so you will find that there will be effect of this d by x in the calculations, right? So Guy's number actually tells you what will be the difference of the heat transfer that will be at the entrance, and what will be the difference in heat transfer characteristics at the entrance to the fully developed region. So this factor you also have to take into account in your calculations. Great. Now, once we have done that, I have raised the question here that, say, suppose if I just keep making the flow turbulent as I keep increasing the velocity profile, whether I am gaining much or not. So I give you the answer. Say, suppose, this we were discussing. Suppose you have a surface and this is a curved surface, right? Now, say, suppose if I have a very low speed flow, I know that there will be a creeping flow. But then if I keep increasing the flow, what will happen after some point of time? This will jump out, and then there will be recirculation zones at the backside. And this particular phenomena is called the flow separation. And I will have a separation point beyond which I will encounter backflow. And these backflows will lead to vortices. And these vortices are essentially the origin of the turbulence, because these vortices will start mixing with each other, will create certain flow patterns, which will later become chaotic as I pump in more energy, right? And then we discussed how exactly the flow separation takes place. Then the von Karman vortex state happens, then turbulent wake, and then entire boundary layer becomes turbulent, as well as the street becomes turbulent. So this we have discussed in detail. Now I go back to the question that says, suppose I am making the flow turbulent. Where exactly I am losing more energy? So whatever is my input energy here, you may see that this is not entirely translated into the flow. A part of the energy is destroyed in the form of developing these recirculation zones. That is at the backside. Wherever there is an intermixing of layer, whatever energy. See, why am I putting the energy? I want to put the energy. Why? Because I want to move this ball faster. But when I'm trying to move the ball faster, what is happening at the backside? There are different types of flow structures that are created, and these flow structures are getting intermixed to each other to dissipate some of my energy at the backside. Correct? Now, this has been defined, and then we discussed about different phenomena in terms of smoke and all. Now, this has been defined as, you essentially encounter two types of frictions. Say, suppose if you have a solid object and if it is trying to move at a particular velocity, you encounter two types of friction. One friction is called the skin friction. Skin friction means, when the flow is coming and the flow is climbing and going out, the friction associated with the tangential direction, that is called the skin friction. Whereas other type of friction is called the form friction, which happens because of these recirculations, which is the normal component of the drag force. So there is a skin drag and then there is a form drag. So in a turbulent flow, you will always encounter, although like, the friction is reducing, but you dissipate a lot of energy in terms of this flow structure creation, because they are also taking a part of your energy that you have invested here. And this, as you minimize, your process becomes more efficient. Right? So what you do, you define the drag coefficient for this sort of surfaces as the drag force divided by half rho v square. This is essentially the F by A cap is your stress divided by half rho v square is your inertia. This is called the drag coefficient. Exactly the same way you define the friction factor. So friction factor, you may see that delta P by rho L by D V square by twice dc. This is nothing but, you are just, dividing the tangential stress with the inertial force that you define as the drag force. And then what you do, you plot drag force with respect to what? With respect to Reynolds number. And if you really look at that, you will find that now you see that this is what? This is again a log scale plot, right? 10 to the minus 1, 10 to the power 0, 10 to the 1, 10 to the 2. So this is also log, this is also log. And here you may see that, at low Reynolds number, you have a very high drag coefficient. And as you keep increasing the Reynolds number, right, you will see the drag coefficient will reduce. But beyond a certain point, you will find there'll be a drastic reduction in the drag coefficient. So this is the situation here. This is the situation here. When it starts shedding, you are here, right? When laminar boundary layer will become turbulent, it will be like this. But when you encounter this sort of situation where the boundary layer is also turbulent, you gain, and this is where you are going at 40 kilometers per hour, 50 kilometers per hour in your car, where you really hit that optimum speed in order to really have the best fuel efficiency of your car. Right? But then, okay, I come to that heat transfer part. Now, again, this you can see in an optimized situation in an aircraft. So this is your uniform. Say, suppose, you are really moving at an optimum velocity. First, what you achieve, in order to reduce this sort of dissipation, what you do, you make a streamlined surface. So the difference between this and that is, moment you make a streamlined surface, this type of, wake formation, that zone becomes very small near the tail. And in most of the places, you achieve the streamlined flow. More importantly, when you move at a very high speed, this is what, you were asking the question, referring to the question that, smooth pipe, smooth turbulent flow. So you see that first what I did, I made the surface a streamlined geometry. Then I made the surface very smooth. And then I made the flow turbulent. This is what you are doing in the aircraft. So what is the consequence? The form drag is minimum here. The boundary layer is turbulent, so that I cannot avoid this laminar boundary layer, because this is where the flow is developing. Moment it is hitting the surface, it is going to stagnate here. So it has to really have a part where it is laminar boundary layer, but I have to minimize this part. I am making sure that near the entire body, the boundary layer is turbulent, so that the friction is minimum, and I am reducing the viscous wake zone. So this is the recipe of the minimum frictional losses in case of engineering processes. So I hope I could answer your question. Who asked this question that, smooth, what is your name? The smooth boundary. I cannot see anybody actually. So that's why I need to ask every time the name. So you said there is a smooth pipe and then you want to be a turbulent boundary layer, correct? And then for a smooth pipe at the molecular level, right? So now you understand what is necessary. It is a smooth surface. I mean, at least at the level of macroscopic level, right? Now, that boundary layer, if you can make turbulent and if you minimize laminar boundary layer and viscous, this is where the skin friction is happening. This is where the viscous wakes are taking place. If you minimize and if you maximize, that means your fuel efficiency is maximum. This is coming straight away from the Nicorard series experiment and Moody's chart where you optimize this parameters. Okay. To get the perspective why we did study there and then connected here. Great. Once that has happened, this you study, this you will always study in the separation points and all. I'm just keeping. So essentially for any type of, this is for a cylinder, this is for a sphere, if you do a study, you will find a critical Reynolds number beyond which the drag coefficient is minimum and your operating point should be always like that, right? Now you join the heat transfer characteristics to that, correct? So you bring in you bring in the aspects of, say, suppose now you see in this sort of situation, say suppose if your sphere is a hot sphere, and then you are flowing the stream, right? Now once you do that, you will see that at different Reynolds number, the hotness of the particle will have the influence on these flow patterns. So in case of only flow situation, what you are doing, you are plotting CD versus Reynolds number, but moment it comes to, the temperature gradient, you also have to look for the Nusselt number here, the Prandtl number here. So different types of correlations, this is for different types of geometry. You just study these parts, different types of geometry, different types of correlation with Nusselt number to Reynolds number is available. Now Prandtl number to Reynolds number is available, right? And at the same time, say suppose you have a shell and tube heat exchanger, you have a tube banks. In those sort of situations also, whenever you are calculating the friction factor for a flow coupled with heat transfer situation, you have to bring in the concept of Nusselt number, Prandtl number, and Reynolds number in the form of Dietz-Boelter equation, in order to really explain them. That is the only change that you have to make. So you first estimate the friction factor without the heat transfer, and then you have to estimate the friction factor with the heat transfer, and you have an array of correlations available. You will see in the tutorials, we will do these things, and from there you will be able to really understand how to manage those parameters. Now, my last question is that, is there any situation where the thermal boundary layer is thicker than the hydrodynamic boundary layer? If I ask you the question, I always say, in the lectures, last 3-4 lectures, I always say that, the thermal boundary layer will always be thinner than the hydrodynamic boundary layer. But there are exceptions. Okay. So in case of a liquid metal, you may find the thermal boundary layer will be thicker than the hydrodynamic boundary layer. Because of the high conductivity of the liquid metal, the thermal boundary layer because of the higher thickness of higher thermal conductivity of the liquid metal, so you may anticipate that thermal boundary layer will grow much faster than the hydrodynamic boundary layer, and then in this sort of situations you may really encounter a delta T which is larger than which will come out faster than delta. Okay. So this much, I believe we have more or less covered all the things, that heat transfer coefficient, Nusselt number, friction factor, okay, and Dietz-Boelter equation, right? And then the different flow regimes, laminar, turbulent, and transitions, and then how to make use of those correlations in the calculation of the friction factor and in the calculation of the heat transfer coefficient. Okay, any question? Any question you have?
Sir, I have a doubt.
Yeah.
You have said that with.
Can you speak a little louder?
In Moody chart, you have said that with increase in velocity, there would be decrease in drag. But sir, in case of smooth pipes, so there was F drag was directly proportional to D square.
Yeah, in Moody chart, what did I say?
When you were giving
yeah.
If there will be a.
Please come closer to the microphone. I am unable to hear you clearly.
Now am I audible?
Yeah, tell. Yeah.
With increase in velocity, there was a decrease in drag. But in case of a smooth pipe, F drag was directly proportional.
See here also with increase in velocity, your friction factor is reducing, right?
Yeah.
Correct? Could you see the friction factor is reducing, right? In case of drag also, your friction drag coefficient is reducing with the Reynolds number. Where is the discrepancy? Hello?
Actually, I have misunderstood.
It's clear, right? Is it clear now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, great. Any other question? Any other question? No. If not, so see you on Monday, and Monday we will have Monday we will have the tutorial. Okay. So see you. Bye bye.